I used to believe Emily and I had the perfect marriage. We'd been together for almost 10 years, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. No, more than that, it felt like we were in sync. We had so much in common, and we were building a life together that seemed solid. I honestly thought she was truly happy. But then, recently, something felt off. You know that gut feeling when things just aren't right? Yeah, that's exactly what started happening with her. She became distant. It was like her mind was somewhere else, and I could feel her pulling away from me. She started skipping family dinners and canceling plans with friends, all while working longer hours. At first, I told myself it was just stress, or maybe something going on at her job. But the more I noticed, the stronger the feeling grew. There was something else happening, something I couldn't ignore. The first real sign came when I found a letter she'd been hiding. It didn't seem like a big deal at first, just a few lines about some old friend from her past. It seemed a little strange. Sure, but people keep old things like that, right? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. Who was this guy? Why was she writing about him? And why had I never heard about him in all these years we'd been together? That's when I started to feel the gap between us getting wider. She wasn't the same Emily anymore. We used to talk about everything. Our dreams, the plans we had for the future, how we'd get there together. Now it felt like I was talking to a brick wall. The late nights at work kept piling up, and when we were together, it was as if I was invisible to her. The excuses she gave me didn't add up, and I began to realize they didn't even make sense anymore. Then I found the receipts. 2 of them from restaurants we'd never been to, places I knew we hadn't visited together. I'm talking about fancy dinners, not the usual quick takeout, but high-end, white tablecloth restaurants that were miles away from where we usually went. She told me they were for work, but come on. Who has work dinners 4 nights a week? I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to figure out what was really going on, so I decided to dig deeper. I hated myself for it, but I put a GPS tracker in her car and installed some tracking software on her phone. Believe me, I didn't want to do it, but I had no other choice. I couldn't sit around, wondering where she was going or who she was with. What I found shocked me. Every few weeks, she'd go to this hotel just outside of town, close enough to be suspicious but far enough to make me wonder. I watched the tracker show her going there, staying for a couple of hours, then coming home like everything was fine. Felt like she was living a double life. The more I thought about it, the more things started to fall into place. Like how she would act when we were with friends, especially when certain topics came up. One night, during dinner, some close friends were joking about past relationships, and Emily completely froze. No reaction. Then, before anyone could even notice, she changed the subject so fast it was like she was hiding something. That was when I really started to feel something was wrong. Things took an even stranger turn when I started getting these anonymous calls. At first, I thought it was a prank, but after everything that had been happening, I wasn't so sure. The voice on the other end kept saying things like, "You don't know the whole story about your wife." They even said she was living a double life. Felt like my entire world was crashing down. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us, was starting to feel like a lie. Then came the final straw. A chance encounter with one of Emily's old acquaintances. Someone she'd never even mentioned to me. We bumped into him at the grocery store of all places. At first, it was just small talk, but then he started sharing all these details about the past. Places she'd been, people she'd known, things I had never heard her talk about. It was like he was talking about a completely different person, not the woman I'd been married to for years. By that point, I wasn't even sure I wanted the truth anymore, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. I had to find out what was really going on, even if it meant uncovering things I wasn't ready to face. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me. What I was about to learn would change everything. Not just about our marriage, but about everything I thought I knew about the woman I married. It's funny how you think you know someone so well. I always thought I had Emily figured out, her childhood, her family, even her past relationships. But after that encounter with her old friend, I knew something was horribly wrong, and I couldn't just ignore it. I wasn't going to back down now. Not after the hotel visits, the weird receipts, the strange phone calls. It wasn't just about our marriage anymore. It was about everything. So I did what I had to do. I went through her phone. I know it sounds wrong, but I had no choice. The GPS tracker showed me where she was going, but now I needed to know exactly who she was meeting. When I looked through her messages, what I found shattered everything I thought I knew. I quickly realized the old friend wasn't just anyone from her past. He was her ex-husband. The messages were all coded, like she was trying to hide something, but after reading enough of them, it was clear they were talking about meeting up, sharing memories of places they used to go. The kicker? None of it lined up with what she'd ever told me about her past. It was all lies. And it wasn't just about wondering if she was cheating anymore. No, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Everything I thought I knew about our life together might have been built on nothing but deception. The worst part? She didn't just call him an old friend. She spoke to him like they shared something deeper, something more than just a simple friendship. That's when I knew I couldn't handle this on my own anymore. I needed to confront her with solid proof, not just suspicions. So, I did what I had to do. I hired a private investigator. Jack was a pro. No questions asked, you just handed him the info and he got to work. I gave him everything, her schedule, the hotel trips, all of it. Then I waited. The paranoia set in hard. Every time Emily left the house, I wondered if this would be the day I finally uncovered the truth. I found myself watching her constantly, trying to figure out if she was lying right to my face. It didn't take long for Jack to send me updates, and when I saw what he'd uncovered, it hit me harder than I could have ever prepared for. Emily's so-called old friend wasn't some distant guy from her past. He was her ex-husband, the one she'd claimed to have left years ago because he was a bad influence, the one she said she wanted nothing to do with. Turns out that was another lie in a long string of them. They'd been in contact the whole time, meeting up behind my back like nothing had ever changed between them. And get this, she even traveled to see him while she was supposed to be on a work trip. I was sick to my stomach, but it didn't stop there. Jack sent me photos, intimate ones, dinners, holding hands, kissing, like they were a couple in love. Then came the videos, clear evidence that these meetings were far from innocent catch-ups. And it wasn't just her ex. Jack found evidence of other men. More hotel meetings, more lies. Every time I thought it couldn't get worse, it did. I sat there at the table, staring at the pile of evidence. Photos, videos, everything that proved my wife was playing me for a fool. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I couldn't even recognize the woman I was married to anymore. Was anything she'd ever told me real? The worst part? I couldn't talk to anyone about it. Not yet. I had to figure out my next move, but inside, I was dying. Our friends were starting to notice something was off. We'd get together, and they'd joke about relationships, secrets, and betrayal, completely unaware that I was living through it. Emily would be sitting there, laughing along, while I gritted my teeth, keeping it all inside. I remember one day at a barbecue, one of my friends made a joke about how every wife has her secrets. It was supposed to be funny, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. Emily was sitting there, sipping her drink, acting like everything was fine, like she wasn't sneaking around with her ex or God knows who else. I wanted to scream, tear apart her perfect little act in front of everyone, but I didn't. I forced a smile, kept the truth locked inside. No one knew what was really happening, not yet. After that, being around my friends started to feel different. I didn't want to be with anyone. How could I? They were all in the dark, just like I had been. I was lying to them just like Emily was lying to me. It made me sick, and I hated every second of it. Jack kept digging, and with each new discovery, my anger grew. I couldn't stop thinking about how I was going to make her pay for everything. But not yet. Now wasn't the time to confront her. I had to play it smart just like she had. She thought she could get away with it, keep me in the dark, but she had no idea what was coming. Confronting her right then would have been too easy. I didn't just want her to admit what she'd done. No, that would let her off the hook. I wanted to destroy everything she'd built. Her career, her reputation, everything. I was going to tear it all down, just like she'd been slowly tearing down everything we had. But I wasn't in a rush. I would take my time. First, I had to get my affairs in order. Divorce was inevitable, but I wasn't going to let her walk away with anything. I called up a lawyer, someone who specialized in cases like mine. We didn't just talk about splitting assets, we talked strategy. He told me the first thing I needed to do was gather everything in writing, emails, texts, photos, videos, anything. I needed to gather anything I could to expose just how deep Emily's deceit ran. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. No, now it was about making sure she paid for everything she'd done. That's when Olivia entered the picture. To be honest, at first, she wasn't part of the plan at all. She was just a colleague. Young, attractive, but nothing more in my mind. That is, until she started flirting with me. Little compliments, lingering glances. It didn't take long for me to realize she was interested. And you know what? After everything Emily had put me through, I wasn't about to turn down that kind of attention. I needed a distraction, and Olivia was perfect for that. But it wasn't just about having someone to take my mind off things. I could use her. At first, our interactions were strictly professional: lunch during the workday, coffee during meetings. But it didn't stay that way for long. I started looking forward to seeing her. The way she laughed at my jokes, the way she'd touch my arm when we talked. There was no mistaking the chemistry. I knew where this was headed, and I let it happen. Was I emotionally involved?
Hell no.
Not after everything Emily did to me. Olivia was just another piece of the puzzle, someone I could use to my advantage. When we crossed that line for the first time, I made damn sure to document everything. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered word. This wasn't about pleasure. Sure, it felt good to have someone actually paying attention to me, but I wasn't naive. I knew this would be another tool I could use when the time came. I was going to bring Emily down piece by piece. She thought she had all the secrets? Well, I had a few of my own. But I wasn't about to sit around waiting for the right moment to confront her. No, I was already setting things in motion. Through my contacts, I started quietly planting rumors about Emily at work. It wasn't hard. People love a juicy bit of gossip, especially when it's about someone climbing the corporate ladder as quickly as she had. It started small. Whispers about her personal life, comments about how distant and distracted she seemed at work. I didn't have to do much. People's imaginations did the rest. I even forged a few documents. Nothing too wild, just enough to make it look like she was slipping up at her job. I had a few people in her professional circle who were more than happy to help her reputation take a dive. I made sure they had everything they needed. Before long, Emily's reputation was in free fall. People started questioning her professionalism, her leadership, even her loyalty to the company. All the while, Emily had no idea what was happening. She still came home acting like everything was normal, still sneaking around with her ex, probably thinking I was too blind or too stupid to notice. But I noticed everything. I was in control now, and she had no clue. Things with Olivia kept progressing. At first, I didn't think much of it, but over time, I found myself enjoying her company. She was easy to talk to, fun. So different from the cold, distant version of Emily I had to deal with every day. We started hanging out more after work on weekends. She thought it was becoming something real. Honestly, I started to feel the same way, but I wasn't about to let my guard down. Not after everything Emily had done. This time, I was the one in charge. I kept Olivia completely in the dark. She had no idea she was just a pawn in my revenge plan. She thought she was falling for a guy whose marriage was falling apart. And maybe, in a twisted way, that was true. But Olivia wasn't the goal here. This was about bringing Emily down. As the weeks went on, I could feel the pressure building. Emily was starting to crack. She'd come home stressed, complaining about her colleagues turning on her, questioning her decisions. She couldn't figure out why her career was suddenly falling apart, and all I could do was sit there, nodding sympathetically, pretending to be the supportive husband, while secretly pulling the strings behind the scenes. But I wasn't done yet. No, this was just the beginning. I was going to hit her where it would hurt the most. And when everything came crashing down, she wouldn't see it coming. I wasn't wasting any more time. Emily had to feel every bit of the pain I'd felt since the moment I discovered her betrayal. It was time for the first strike, the one she wouldn't expect. I made sure the proof of her infidelity ended up in the hands of the right person, one of her biggest professional rivals. Emily hadn't just made her way up the corporate ladder. She'd made some enemies along the way. She liked to play the perfect professional, always smiling, shaking hands, playing nice. But behind the scenes, she was cutthroat. I knew exactly who would relish the chance to see her taken down a notch. It was almost too easy. I dropped a few anonymous hints, shared a handful of incriminating photos that couldn't be explained away, and within days the rumor mill started grinding. By the time Emily walked into the big client event, the whispers were already spiraling out of control. She had no clue, of course. Why would she? As far as she was concerned, she was still holding all the cards, keeping her little secrets under wraps. The event was packed. Clients, bosses, people who could either make or break her career. I was there too, playing the part of the supportive husband, standing by her side, smiling while she chatted with people who were about to turn on her. I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction watching from the sidelines. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck, but one I had set in motion. The whispers found her soon enough. At first, it was just a few sideways glances, then some hushed conversations. Emily noticed, of course. She was sharp, but she had no idea what was happening. I saw the confusion creeping into her face as she moved through the crowd, trying to act like everything was fine. And then it happened. One of her colleagues, someone who used to have her back, cornered her. They didn't need to say much, but I could see it in their eyes, the judgment, the disdain. Emily didn't have a clue how they knew. She stood there, stunned, the realization hitting her like a freight train. Her perfect little world was unraveling, right there in front of her. I could practically see it in her posture, the way she moved. She was rattled. At one point, she pulled me aside, her voice shaky, asking, "Do you think someone's spreading rumors about me?" It was almost like she was trying to convince herself more than anything else. I just shrugged, playing dumb, hiding the grin tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Probably nothing," I said, acting like it was no big deal, knowing full well that it was just the beginning. Meanwhile, things with Olivia were getting more complicated. What started out as a simple part of my revenge plan was starting to morph into something else. We were still keeping it secret, meeting in places nobody would notice, but I could feel the tension growing. It wasn't just about the physical side anymore, though that was definitely still a part of it. Olivia was getting emotionally invested, and I could tell she was starting to suspect that I wasn't in this for the same reasons she was. She asked me more than once if I was really ready to move on from Emily. "Is this really what you want?" she'd say, her voice soft, like she was trying to gauge my feelings. I'd lie, of course, telling her what she wanted to hear. "Of course I'm ready," I'd say, kissing her as if everything was fine, even though my mind was still completely fixated on taking Emily down. Olivia wasn't stupid. She could see through the cracks, starting to suspect that I had ulterior motives. But by then, she was too far gone. She cared about me, or at least she thought she did. I knew she wouldn't walk away, not now. But back to Emily. After the event, things started to unravel for her. Her reputation was in freefall. Clients were questioning her integrity. Colleagues were distancing themselves. I watched it all unfold with a dark, twisted satisfaction. I had set the wheels in motion, and now there was no stopping it. Still, she had no idea I was behind it all. She started getting paranoid, accusing people at work of talking behind her back. She'd come home, venting to me, completely unaware that I was the one pulling all the strings. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was orchestrating her downfall, and she was so tangled up in her own lies, she couldn't see it. I began to push her, just a little, trying to get her to admit what she'd done. I'd make comments about trust, loyalty, how secrets always come out in the end. But she'd always deny it, stubborn as hell, refusing to face the truth. I'd look her in the eye and ask, "Are you sure there's nothing you need to tell me?" And every time, she'd look right back at me and say, "No, of course not." It was maddening but also satisfying. She still thought she was in control, still didn't realize the walls were closing in on her. And then there was Olivia. She was starting to catch on. She wasn't dumb. She could feel the distance between us, even though we were still meeting up regularly. One day, she asked me point blank, "Are you just using me to get back at your wife?" I brushed it off, but I saw the doubt in her eyes, the way she hesitated before letting things go any further. I knew I had to make a decision soon. Either I'd keep Olivia in the game as part of my revenge plan, or I'd have to come clean. But for now, I was too focused on Emily's downfall. The real show was just getting started, and I wasn't about to lose control of it now. I had been planning this moment for weeks. Every move, every step carefully calculated. I had every piece of evidence I'd gathered, each detail meticulously planned, each document a stepping stone toward this moment. It was all leading to this day, the day I would finally expose everything and show Emily that I wasn't the clueless husband she'd thought I was. I wanted her to feel the full weight of humiliation, to understand, in that crushing moment, the consequences of everything she'd done. And the best part? She had no idea it was coming. The lawyers had been involved for weeks. But today was the day we'd sit down to discuss divorce terms. Before any paperwork was signed, though, I had one last card to play. I made sure her lawyer would be there, too. He walked in with a smug look on his face, probably thinking he'd score Emily a sweet deal. Little did he know, I had prepared the bombshell that would blow everything apart. We sat in the meeting room, Emily, her lawyer, my lawyer, and me. She was dressed in her usual professional attire, looking every bit the confident, composed woman I once admired. But underneath that polished exterior, I could see the cracks. Her career had been spiraling for weeks now, ever since the rumors of her affair began circulating. She was losing clients, her colleagues were avoiding her calls, and her reputation was hanging by a thread. But she still thought she was in control of me, of this divorce. How wrong she was. I slid the folder across the table. As Emily opened it, I watched her face as she flipped through the evidence. Photos, texts, emails. Everything that tied her to her ex-husband, and all the other men she'd been sneaking around with. Her face drained of color. Her hands trembled as she asked in a low voice, "Where did you get this?" Panic laced her words. I leaned back, crossing my arms, savoring the moment. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out, Emily?" I said, my voice steady. "You didn't just cheat. You lied about your entire life. And now it's all out in the open." Her lawyer, who'd been sitting with an air of confidence, suddenly looked rattled. He tried to salvage the situation. "We can discuss this privately," he said, already scrambling to figure out how to fix things. But I wasn't having it. "Oh, I'm not interested in keeping this private," I replied. "I think it's time we bring this into the light. I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of playing nice." Emily's face went even paler. Her lips parted in disbelief. She knew what was coming, but there was nothing she could do to stop it now. The final blow had already been set in motion. I'd arranged for the evidence to leak right before a major corporate dinner, one where all the key players in her professional world would be gathered. By the time Emily walked into that event, everyone would know the truth. And it went exactly as I had planned. When Emily entered the room that night, the atmosphere shifted. It was like the room itself recoiled from her presence. People began avoiding her, moving away as though she was radioactive. At first, she still tried to put on her usual act, making the rounds, smiling, and pretending like everything was fine. But soon enough, the questions started, subtle at first, almost casual. Questions about her personal life, things she couldn't easily brush off. And then someone, I can't even remember who, asked the question out loud. "So, how's your ex-husband doing?" Still sneaking off to meet him on the side. I saw Emily's face drain of all color. She tried to keep her composure, but it was already too late. The damage was done. The room had already turned against her. She stammered, offering up some half-baked excuse, laughing awkwardly, but it was obvious. No one bought it. The mask had cracked, and there was no hiding behind it anymore. The truth had spilled out into the open, and that was when Emily broke down. She tried to justify herself, blaming me, blaming her job, even blaming the strain of our marriage. But the more she spoke, the worse it got. The people who had once admired her, the friends she thought she could count on, every single one of them turned their backs. The betrayal she had so carefully constructed over the years was crumbling before her eyes, and I stood there watching it, feeling a cold satisfaction wash over me. After the event, everything accelerated. The divorce was set in motion, and now I was the one holding all the cards. Emily knew it. Her lawyer knew it. My lawyer, calm and self-assured, had a look on his face that said everything. We were going to win this. Emily tried to put up a fight, clinging to what little she had left, but I wasn't backing down. I made sure she lost a substantial portion of our assets. All that she had worked for in her career gone. The life we had built together shattered. The meeting with the lawyers to finalize everything was tense. Emily sat across from me, a shadow of the confident woman I had once known. Her lawyer did his best to salvage what he could, but the evidence was insurmountable. The affairs, the lies, the money spent on secret getaways. Everything was laid bare. Emily tried to make eye contact with me, perhaps hoping for some last-ditch plea, some way to talk her way out of this. She probably thought I would cave like I had in the past. But I wasn't having it. I was done. I said very little. I just nodded as my lawyer dismantled every argument her side tried to make. By the end of the meeting, Emily was defeated, broken. There was nothing left to fight for. It was over. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of calm. The game was over and I had won. It was clear Emily had lost. After the papers were signed, she tried one last desperate attempt to reach out to me. Michael, please, can we talk? I never meant for any of this to happen. We can fix this. You don't have to do this. I didn't even look at her as I turned to walk away. There's nothing to talk about, Emily. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. I left her there, standing in the wreckage of her own life. The divorce was finalized, and I walked away with the upper hand. She had nothing left. No career, no reputation, no friends. She was utterly alone. Once the divorce was settled, a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying for months finally lifted off my chest. The plotting, the tracking, the constant calculating, all of it had drained me, but the satisfaction was undeniable. I had come out with the majority of our assets and Emily's career destroyed. The colleagues who had once admired her were gone, and even her former lover had washed his hands of her. She had no one left. But what came next wasn't what I'd expected. It wasn't just the satisfaction of seeing Emily fall that gave me peace. It was the realization that I had closed the chapter on that toxic relationship. For years, Emily had been a constant weight dragging me down. Now that she was out of the picture, I was free to focus on something new, something real. That's when things with Olivia started to shift. What had begun as part of my revenge plan had evolved into something more. Olivia and I had been seeing each other for months. In the beginning, I'll admit, it was all about payback. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about Emily. Olivia became more than just a distraction. I started actually looking forward to our time together. Not just for the physical connection, but for the deeper bond that was starting to form between us. It wasn't immediate. After everything I'd been through, I wasn't about to dive headfirst into another relationship without being cautious. I kept my guard up, and Olivia could tell. She asked me about my past, about what I really wanted going forward. For once, I didn't have all the answers. But one thing was clear. I was done with revenge. I was tired of living in the past, tired of being defined by what had happened. I wanted something real, something built on trust, not manipulation or lies. As the weeks turned into months, Olivia and I grew closer. We started talking about the future, a fresh start. We'd leave behind the wreckage that had been my life with Emily and build something of our own. We found a new place to call home. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt like a fresh beginning. A place where we could carve out a life together, without the weight of my past hanging over us. I even began thinking about opening a business with Olivia. She'd always been sharp, business savvy, and together, I felt like we could build something truly meaningful. Not just professionally, but personally, too. It wasn't just about building a career. It was about building a life together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. The anger, the need for revenge, it all faded away. My focus shifted entirely to the future, to what Olivia and I could create together. Meanwhile, Emily was falling apart. I heard through the grapevine that she'd left the city, trying to start fresh somewhere else. But the damage to her reputation was irreversible. Every job she tried to land came with the shadow of her past, following her like a dark cloud. No one was willing to hire someone with a history of betrayal and public humiliation. Even her family, the people who had always stood by her, started pulling away. They couldn't look past the lies, the affairs, the mess she had made of her life. A few months after the divorce, Emily tried reaching out to me. I don't know what she expected. Maybe she thought I'd feel guilty, or that I'd be open to some kind of reconciliation. But when I saw her name flash on my phone, I didn't hesitate. I ignored her call. Then the dozen more messages she left after that. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the fallout. I heard she had fallen into a deep depression, struggling to hold her life together with no job, no friends, and nowhere to turn. There was a time, maybe, when I would have felt pity for her, when I might have considered helping. But not anymore. Emily wasn't my problem anymore. Not after everything. One evening, Olivia and I caught up with some old friends. People who had known Emily and had witnessed everything. They couldn't believe the transformation. "You look like a completely new man," one of them said. "It's incredible how much has changed." And they were right. I wasn't the same person I had been when this whole ordeal started. I wasn't the angry, bitter man obsessed with revenge anymore. I had changed. I had grown. I wasn't defined by Emily anymore, by what she had done to me. She was a chapter in my past, but she wouldn't define my future. As the evening wore on, the conversation eventually turned to Emily. Someone asked, "So, how is she doing?" I just shrugged. "I don't really know. I don't keep up with her anymore." There was some surprise, of course. They expected me to still care, to have lingering feelings about her downfall. But I didn't. Emily's life was her own mess to sort out. I had moved on, and for the first time in years I felt truly free. That night, Olivia and I left together, hand in hand, walking down a new path. My life had been torn apart, rebuilt, and transformed. And now I was ready for whatever came next. Emily was nothing but a memory, a reminder of who I used to be and just how far I had come.